Well, welcome to the Culture Couch Live. I've got Carly, Misso and Woz. G'day, gang. How are you?
Hey, guys. How are we
going? How are you?
Going very well. The Kangas had a good win, so happy about that. Things are going along nicely down there. So well done to David Noble and the team. And Jack Zeeble, the coaches, and the captains, leadership group. So well done to them. Just a quick shout out. Guys, let me just read out this question for you. This is from Greg. Greg said, and I'll paraphrase as I normally do, Greg said he attended one of our workshops through his company, and he heard me talk about the leadership code and are you the leader you wish you had? And he tried to explain it to one of his workmates and probably just wanted us to put that in a little bit of context. So, yeah, so just for context for everyone that's listening. So at the end of 1998, I sat down at my desk and I wrote down the things I liked about my leaders, and actually it's just here now, so I've still got it, and the things I didn't like about my leaders. And it really formed, I didn't actually know I was going to coach, to be perfectly frank, but it actually formed an audit for me when I did coach. And it was really, really great for me to hold myself accountable to the leader that I wish I had. And that's what we talk about in our workshops when we're working with our clients. Are you the leader you wish you had? And it's a really good exercise to do. So, Miss, I might throw to you. I mean, you obviously worked with me at the Sydney Swans. Was there anything that sort of stuck out for you, not only in my behaviour or my habits or what I did as a leader, but is there one thing that you've sort of picked up through your time at the Swans, St Kilda under Roosy and then Melbourne under Mark Neald and myself?
Yeah, look, I reckon, and it may sound a little bit counterintuitive, but I think great leaders don't try to be someone they're not.
Yeah.
They try to be, they're just themselves, but they're still aspirational and they still want to, be the best leader they can be, and they still want to take the team on a great journey. But they remain authentic and true to themselves, and they don't try and, as I say, they don't try and be someone they're not. If they don't think they're the smartest person in the room, then they don't try and be the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
So I think it's that authenticity, which is a critical thing, as well as having that aspirational vision and drive to want to help their team become the best team they can be.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because authenticity, it's a really interesting point. And I always feel like, I might throw to you, it's almost the hardest thing to do and I say this respectfully, like if I looked at the coaches that I had, David Park and Robert Walls, they were authentic, but they were naturally hard men, and probably a lot of leaders that we all grew up in were naturally, if we look at our profiling, red and top down, et cetera, et cetera. So I didn't ever see them as not authentic, but it's hard not to pick up those skills, isn't it? Where a lot of us have been taught by top down, top command and control. And part of, I guess, your leadership code should be, what type of leader do you want to be? Not what the type of leader that you had necessarily. Now, you're going to pick up some traits from them clearly, but that's a bit of a challenge too, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, for me personally, I've gone through, say, from football, where your leaders are male, and then my previous bosses were all males. And I think, the old hat style of methodology, as you said, you went through looking at the leader you wanted to be. I reckon in that list, you probably picked up on more negative points than positive points in that list, right? So that's the first thing. So if you're reflecting on that, and as we terminology, we call it role model leaders. Yeah. The role models we had were very negative authoritarians and, do it this way or else. And that's sort of even the mindset today of, employees being inside a business and having a leader like that, you just wouldn't keep staff. Whereas in the past, you probably actually just put up with it.
Yeah.
So for me, I look at, I had to go through that evolution of learning because I was taking on the role model from previous leaders that I had and actually being that authoritarian. I obviously had the personality profile that lends itself easily into being that type of person, but I had to really step back and look at what are the good traits of somebody who is sort of leading by example. And I think the one is passion. The passion can come out in multiple facets. So that passion can come out really.
Yeah, 100% agree. Carly, what about a simple sort of practical exercise that we can sort of put it into some sort of context? How can they sort of frame their own sort of leadership code or leadership values or behaviours? Because it's something I think is really important.
Yeah, so in Brene Brown's book, Dare to Lead, she's got a section in there about identifying your own personal values so that you understand your leadership values and then how that links into the business values, into the company values. So I guess the same kind of exercise, I actually did the exercise and I'll show it to you now. So she's got in her book, Dare to Lead, as I mentioned, she's got one page, which is a whole list of values. So what she asks you to do is to look through all these values, and there's a lot of words here. So, if you're interested, just reach out to us. We can help you with the exercise. But it's about going through and just the words that, stick out to you or are meaningful to you, just to circle them. And you might end up with 8 or 10 of them. But then you want to think about those 8 or 10 and then get it down to probably your top 2 or 3 words that are really meaningful to you and in your leadership journey. So that's the exercise, just to look through the words and to think about what your values are. And I actually did it when I read the book. And so there's a lot of things for me that are important in my role as a leader, but I never really pinpointed specifically what they were. And then when I looked through that list, the 2 words for me were around inclusivity and reliability. And it's interesting then when you reflect on that. So for me, inclusivity, that's about making sure that I'm communicating to the team, that they all understand where they sit. And even in decision making, I like to do it in a collaborative fashion where, if you need to make a decision, I like to get, your 2 or 3 or 4 heads of departments or people who can bounce things off and just really thrash it out together and work through those problems and solutions. And that's another example of inclusivity, of, doing it as a team and collaborating together. And then reliability for me is also really important. So that's more of something that I want to be someone people can rely on, and I want them to see that I'm doing that, so that then that's something within my leadership style, my business, the business potentially that sort of comes to the fore. So I think it's a really nice exercise and a really good exercise just to help you kind of define your guiding principles. And that's exactly what we say to people when we're talking about the business values and the business behaviours. It becomes your guiding principles. And I think it's quite interesting when you think about it in that perspective.
Yeah, I think the other good thing to do, which I encourage, we do the one-on-one coaching guys. The other thing I encourage too, Misso, is ask people what you are now, because it's actually really good. Sometimes they actually don't know what their starting point is. So, when you put that list up there, Carly, it's also good to know where people think you are, sort of thing. So, because there's no point in necessarily, you might be the most supportive person, in the room. So you might necessarily have to work on that. Now, that's obviously really important, but I like to think, what are your weaknesses a little bit? Because you've got to work on both. You want to be supportive, but Misso, talk to that a bit about just maybe asking a couple of staff members or friends or family how they see you as a leader as well.
Yeah, look, it's a great point. And, the exercise that Carly showed there, one thing that's really important when doing that exercise is not choosing words that you think you want people to think about you as, it's choosing the words that you actually are. And that is sometimes hard and it requires strong self-reflection, but don't choose the words that you want people to think you should be. Choose the words that you actually are. But I think, the exercise you're talking about, Roosy, is a great one, is ask 3 or 4 people who you really trust and that are going to be honest with you, and say, can you just write 3 words that describe me? And can we have a cup of coffee and talk about why you chose those words? And that's one of the most simple feedback exercises you can do. But if you choose the right people and you have the right conversation, you can get so much out of it.
And that's the balance, isn't it, Was? To what Misso said, you, at some point in time when you do the exercise, you might be X, Y, Z, but is that really what you want to be? And that's the looking in the mirror part, isn't it, Misso? You sort of, this is what I am, but this is what I aspire to be. And it's also having people holding you accountable. So I think what we're trying to say, don't underestimate the importance of the exercise, and don't be too flippant about it. You've got to be really honest when you're doing it. And I think, was to your credit, you've been a really honest leader around where you were at and how you improved those skills. So maybe take us through from your point of view.
That's the hardest part, even the personality profiling piece, when you look at some of the questions in those type of tests and then trying to reflect on what you are versus what you want to be is the hardest thing. Everyone looks at it and goes, oh, I wish I was that, so I surely am that. And that self-awareness piece is so critical. But I think, when I've done that actual exercise with others, having others around you to bounce the scenarios off and actually giving examples of where they have been a certain way or word or lived out that behaviour or not lived out that behaviour in the opposite fashion is critical. And I think, that exercise is awesome. And I think for me, I'm always looking at it where I'm not doing it and trying to, the words that I want to be, I catch myself not being that way and looking at the cases to where I'm not living out that to come back to it. But that critical correction is key.
And I think that, well, hopefully there's a couple of examples, because we talk about do your self-audit. Maybe the people that you aspired to be, like the leader that you saw with, then that might be a teacher at school, it might be the local netball coach, might be the first CEO, first sales manager. So what were those attributes that you really liked about him? But to your point I think it's equally as important to say, what didn't you like? Because that'll probably come out a little bit easier, and you're probably going to be doing some of those things because it's almost like, oh, I didn't like it, but that's what they did to me, sort of thing. So there's this sort of ridiculous competitive nature we have. So I'd really encourage everyone to do that. And then, the Brené Brown style.
And I think the other thing that was pointed out too is about the review. So you can choose your values and you can choose your behaviours that you want to be, but that's not necessarily always going to be the same. And just checking in and reviewing at certain times throughout your journey or throughout your career is probably something that's really important too.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's the accountability buddy or whatever that can always hold you accountable, or even to your point, Misso, that starts to see through that, Roosy, hang on, you're trying to be someone you're not. I know you've come up with your leadership code, and I'm really supportive of that. But, you're talking about being driven. You're not someone that rants and raves. That's not driven for you. That might be driven for someone else. I reckon that's a really good point too, Misso.
Yeah, and I think, we always talk about self-awareness being the absolute critical pillar of being a great leader. And that just doesn't happen overnight. It just doesn't come, when you sit down and do an exercise like that. I think it's important that you do get a bit of feedback from those people close to you, but you do really honestly, authentically self-reflect and say, well, who am I? And importantly, what sort of person do I actually want to be?
Yeah.
And, that will give you something to work on.
Yeah, and hopefully the starting point's not poles apart. Hopefully you're not sitting there going, well, I'm this, and this, but I want to be this. It's like, wow, I'm a mile away from that. And I think the other thing is just keep getting better every day. I reckon it's a good point, Misso. You're not going to get from whether you're a 6 and you want to get to a 10, or a 7 you want to get to a 10, or a 1 and you want to get to a 10. Just keep getting better every day, and don't be too hard on yourself. But hopefully, guys, that's great advice, really good exercise, really practical stuff. So hopefully that answers the question. Have a great weekend, guys, and we'll see you again next week on the Culture Couch Live.
See you guys. Thank you.